Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you with us. For those who don't know me yet, my name is Ron Levine from Mindfulness and Blue Jeans. I've been practicing mindfulness and insight meditation for almost 25 years and started during a time when I was dealing with clinical anxiety and depression and a raging panic disorder that had blown up into agoraphobia. I was on disability and unable to leave my house and was fortunate enough to get paired up with a psychologist who, even back in 1998, was several decades deep into practicing and teaching mindfulness and insight meditation. And that was my beginning on this path. I really didn't think it was going to do anything. And I have found that it has actually offered me everything. And that's kind of going to be the theme for today's sitting. So let's go ahead and jump in, okay? I always like to begin my sitting by imagining that I am suspended from the ceiling by a piece of string attached to the top of my head as a nice cue to sit up straight without adding any extra tension to do so. If there's some tension here right now, that is fine. Completely fine. We can allow tension to be tension, rather than trying to get rid of it, force it away, which usually means bringing more tension to it. You don't really get rid of tension by bringing more tension to it. I found it makes more sense to simply notice the tension that is here as the tension that it is. And that's enough. I also like to notice what is holding me up, supporting me. A chair, a cushion, a floor. There's a sense of grounding beneath me. Let's take a moment to notice that sense of grounding beneath us and this gentle suspension from the top. And whatever else happens to be in between the two of us for us right now, however it is. And if you haven't already, you may begin to bring your attention to your breathing. Sometimes we may notice that our breathing changes as we bring our attention to it. Sometimes we do it deliberately. Sometimes it just seems to happen on its own. Usually this happens because we have some kind of requirement conscious or subconscious. Some kind of requirement for our breathing. We want it to feel a certain way. We think it needs to be a certain way. Perhaps in terms of our meditation, we think it needs to be something long and deep and contemplative. Certainly, during the many years that I was fighting my own panic, I had a requirement that my breathing not get too fast. Because that could signify a panic attack. In this practice, we are seeing how we are actually living. So rather than trying to continuously satisfy requirement after requirement that we have, we are bringing attention to the requirements themselves. Sometimes we don't even notice they're there. Like I say, they could be conscious or subconscious. So sometimes we run in circles, making ourselves miserable, trying to satisfy requirements we don't even realize we have, because we've had them for so long. Well, that's something we should probably see, huh? And we can start that just with the breathing. If we allow the breathing to simply be as it is, because the body knows how to breathe, we don't have to do anything, right? If we simply let the body breathe, what comes up? Do we notice perhaps some agitation because our requirements aren't being met? Do we perhaps notice some relief because we are no longer so tightly bound to having to try to satisfy them? Or are we not even yet quite sure what our requirements even are? Or if we even have any? See if you can just stay with the breathing as it is. And see what comes up around it. Maybe pleasant, maybe unpleasant, maybe neither. Just seeing what plays out when we just watch the breathing unfold as it is. As we attempt to keep our attention focused on our breathing, we'll very often get pulled away into a line of thinking. And as we notice that we've been pulled away, we may think that this is interfering with our practice. And so we may develop a requirement to stop thinking, right? And of course, that requirement is in itself a thought process, right? So much for not thinking. We can just notice, there's another requirement. And come back to the breathing. You may have requirements for how the body feels. Maybe in general, maybe a specific area. We may have requirements for how we feel emotionally. We very likely and very often have requirements for how our sitting practice must go. How we want it to make us feel. That can be well-intentioned, but ultimately I find it gets in the way. As I often like to say, when we decide where our practice must go, we lose the opportunity to see where our practice could go. So we don't need to fight with our requirements. This is a process of seeing, discovery, feeling. We just want to find out what our requirements are. Why they're here. Why they think they are needed. And are they actually helping? What happens if we simply focus on the breathing as it is? And watch what comes up. And then watch what comes up when we don't try to interfere with what is coming up. When we let the requirements be requirements. Without jumping up and running around trying to service all of them. What requirements do our requirements then present? As you go through the rest of your day or your evening, I invite you to come back to the breathing and notice, based on what is coming up internally, based on things happening externally, what are our requirements? How is it that we need things to go, that we need to feel? We need things to be. And what happens if we take a moment to just notice the requirement? Breathe with the requirement, which is just a thought. A thought that we can watch as it arises. Notice what happens when we loosen our requirements about our requirements. Just see how it plays out. This is the process of, rather than seeing where our practice must go, seeing where our practice can go. Thank you, everyone. I'll hang on for a couple of moments if anyone wants to put anything in the chat, any questions or observations. Annette, how do you bring yourself back during the day when your mind starts to go all over the place? It's a practice. It's one of those things that as we continue to do it, it becomes easier because we're making a habit out of it. You may want to find something that will help remind you. For example, there's an app that I used to use occasionally on my phone. I think it was called Mind Bell. I think it was one word, Mind Bell. And you could schedule it to ring a chime at various times throughout the day on a fixed or random schedule. And so whatever you were doing, you would hear that, and that would remind you to take a moment, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and just check in. So you might try something like that. But it is something that, like I say, it's hard at first because it's not a habit yet. But like anything else, if we work at it, it will become more and more automatic. Because I can speak for myself. It's for years. It's something that I'm doing all the time now, just because it's what I've been practicing for so long. Again, it's like any other habit. So you may try something like a Mind Bell app or something like that will get you started. And then you'll very likely find that as you continue to build that habit, that practice, it'll just start to come automatically. So I hope that helps. Yes, Stephanie's got it right there. Practicing regularly in the quiet moments, right? So it's not just a matter of trying to do it in those crisis moments when we need it the most, right? It's about also remembering to do it in those moments when everything's fine. That's how we build the practice, when we're doing it all the time or during any time. Because if you try to only do it when we're in crisis mode, well, that's going to be really difficult because we're in crisis mode. But if we're practicing it when we're not in crisis mode, and then the shit hits the fan, then it might just come up on its own because we've been practicing it. It's become just part of what we do. Not part of what we do when the shit's hitting the fan, part of what we do, period. All the time. Yeah, a mantra may help, from Michelle. I don't use mantras, really, but some people find them very helpful. There's nothing wrong with it. If that helps you get centered, if that helps you remember, absolutely. Absolutely. Go with it. Yeah, great suggestion. The teacher that got me started years ago, he described it like when you're planting one of those lawns using grass plugs. So you just thunk grass plug in, and thunk and another grass plug, and you start building this lawn. That's the way he described it, was you remember to come to the present moment and watch what is coming up and watch what you're doing with what's coming up. And each time you remember to do that, thunk, it's a grass plug. So you start off with this barren land, right? There's no grass anywhere. And then you thunk, thunk, you just do it here, you do it there, and this lawn starts to fill in. And that's a visual that has stayed with me for almost 25 years now, and it is one that over the course of my practice I have found to be accurate. Oh yeah, this is a good one. I'll close with this. Stephanie has here about listening to music. Songs will come to your mind when you need them, which beckons a question: what soundtrack are you listening to? So if you follow me on social media, I post a thought for the day on various platforms. If you look for Mindfulness and Blue Jeans. And I think it was a few days ago, I posted one that shows a bunch of birds sitting on telephone wires in such a way that it looks like musical notes. And the caption that I put for it was, "What song does life play when you stop conducting?" Which is really just another way of saying, hey, if we just catch our requirements as they are and stop trying to enforce them so much, what plays out? Right? Because that's why we get so wrapped up in our requirements, is we're trying to force things to be a certain way, usually because we're afraid of how they're going to go if we don't. And our freedom is really in allowing things to play out. Not that we don't set the causes and conditions for them to play out in a way that is beneficial. But the problem becomes when we get so wrapped up in it that we are past the point of having done what we should do, and we are now crossed over into the point of rumination, unhelpful obsession, this kind of suffering. That's not helping. That's not useful. That's not even effective. I mean, it's effective at making us miserable. That's about it. Chris, did you get nervous when you first started teaching? I get nervous. Yeah, sure. I mean, the thing about being nervous and so forth is, I mean, I still deal with anxiety. It's not like I don't experience anxiety anymore. One of my favorite quotes about this kind of a practice is, it doesn't cure you of your neuroses, it makes you a connoisseur of them. So it's not that I don't experience nervousness and anxiety anymore. It's that they aren't crippling. It's not a life-stopping crisis for them to be here. To put it in terms of today's practice, I don't have a requirement that I don't feel anxiety, that I don't feel nervousness. So when these things come up, okay, they're here. Are they necessarily pleasant? No. Is there discomfort? Yeah. But at least I'm not adding more discomfort. I'm not adding suffering on top of whatever discomfort's already here, because I have this requirement that they must not be here, which, I mean, never worked anyway, right? Only made things worse. So, of course, I still experience these things. I just have a very different relationship with them now. Oh, this is here. Okay. And maybe there's something I need to do to tend to it. And maybe it's just part of my experience right now and I go about my business. But that's the big difference here. Not that I don't feel these things. It's that I don't turn it into a crisis when I do. Yeah, so requirement, expectation, different from intention setting. Yeah, yes, it is. There can be some overlap. I mean, we can have unskillful intentions coming out of our requirements that come from fear, right? So there's definitely some overlap. We want to see where these requirements are coming from, as well as seeing where our intentions are coming from. And that's what this practice is about, is developing this clear seeing. So is this requirement helpful? Maybe, maybe not. Is this intention skillful? Maybe, maybe not. You need to see, is this causing me distress and suffering? We can carry out an intention to set causes and conditions in place without requiring that the effects of those causes and conditions perfectly align with our desires. So there's some overlap there. But there's also some nuance between them. I'm going to wrap it up there. I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Hope to see you all again real soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Cheers.